Hi friends, welcome back. Today we're starting something new. So this is the painting I'm working on right now, and I'm going to show you how I got to this stage. I haven't really taken the time to show you in full detail how I get from concept to finished painting. So this video is going to show you how I came up with the concept, some of my reference photos. I'll show you my sketching. I'll show you me picking out the colors. I do use the color cube for this one. So I'll show you kind of how I go through and pick out what I like and then narrow it down to the colors that I'm going to end up going with. And then we'll go through me putting the base wash colors on so that I have a general idea of what I'm going to be doing. And yeah, it'll be fun. Let's get started. So I didn't show you how I find all these reference photos, but these are the reference photos that I have saved to my phone that are just things that inspire me and things that have kind of given me some ideas for what I want this painting to be. I have talked about this before, and I had a goal to do an underwater scene this year. So this is kind of a thing that has been building up. Is I've been looking at different underwater style images and just saving anything that I think would be useful. So those are my reference photos. It does actually take me a few hours to a couple of months to get the pictures together and figured out as far as what I'm gonna do, but that wouldn't be fun to watch, so you get the end result of that. And then now that I have the color cubes, the next thing that I do is take some time to go through one of them. I never go through both of them when I'm just starting out on a painting. It can be way too much to go through. And my general rule is that I won't go through more than 20 or 30 cards. Sometimes I'll do a little bit more than that, but most of the time I just take one single little stack of cards and I'll go through those to see if there's anything in there that's in the color family that I have that I'm thinking of using. And the important thing with getting all your reference photos figured out first is a lot of the time the reference photos will also inform what colors you want to use. And like you saw, I have a range of color options from my reference photos, but a lot of deep blues. And I do want to make sure that this painting has a lot more color than that. I don't want it to be super dark. I do want it to be coral reefy, so lots of colors, lots of vibrancy, and so that meant that I needed to find some things from the color cube that would have more of that range to them. And I picked volume 2 of the color cube because that one does have underwater stuff in it, so that made my life a lot easier. And then these are all of the ones that I picked out. So I've got this one that's just underwater. I've got some coral reef ones that have some good color ranges for me to play with. And at this point, I've chosen too many cards. And I do that deliberately. I always try to pick 2 to 3 times as many cards as what I want to use on the finished painting, just because it gives you some options. And sometimes if you only pick 2 or 3, you can find that some of the colors don't go quite as well as what you were imagining in your head, or you can find yourself a little bit more stuck. So the cards that I don't end up picking, I will put in the front of the color cube so that I can change my mind if I need to. So I go through, I pick out what ones I want, put the remainder back in the front of the color cube, and then I've got my colors picked out. And here I have two kind of just basic underwater swatches, and the one that I chose in this shot doesn't end up being the one that I stick with, because the next thing I'm going to do is pick out paint colors that match these swatches. And I found that I didn't love some of the colors in the swatch sheet that I picked, so I ended up switching that one out. But these are the 4 cards that I initially picked. I believe it's that bottom one that gets swapped by the time I actually pick out my colors. But the next thing I'll do is make a sketch. Sometimes I like doing sometimes I'll pick out my colors and then do the sketch. Sometimes I'll do the sketch and then pick out the colors. It just kind of depends on the mood of the day and what I'm feeling like at the time. A lot of the time, if I'm going to do something like this, that's it's not a subject that I paint very often, so it's not one of my mountain scenes or forest scenes with foxes. This is something completely different. I will do a base coat so that I have something to kind of show my eye what I'm doing while I'm doing it. But before I do that base coat, it does help to just sketch something out, have a general idea of what I'm going to do and what's going to go where, so that then when I put that first coat of paint down, I have kind of some guidelines, basically. And I do this in pencil. I don't ever worry about the pencil showing through whatever color I put down, because the color I'm putting down is not going to be the final layer. All of the color that I put on this canvas by the end of this video is stuff that's not going to be here. So then I will take a few minutes, I'll talk myself through my plan, my ideas, and then we get to picking out our paint colors. And I know that I have shown you guys this step before, and it is a little bit tedious, but it's definitely worth taking the time to pick out any colors that you think you're going to use on the canvas. It's a lot easier if you have your set colors set aside out of all of your paint tubes before you get started, purely because then you're not having to stop and sift through all of your paint collection, but you have kind of a set, like a little subset of colors that you're working with that you can look through and figure out what goes with what, basically. I find that it just makes it a lot easier to avoid decision paralysis if you have a smaller list of colors that you can work from. And again, that's one of the things that I love with having the color cubes. I'll happily link those below. I know I've talked about them before in a couple of videos, but they're from Sarah Renee Clark. She's a YouTuber. She's super fun. I love her videos. She's adorable. And she comes up with some tools that are really, really nice for artists. And the color cubes are one that I do recommend to a lot of artists. If you ever have decision paralysis when it comes to choosing your colors, 100% the color cubes are worth it. It really helps, again, with just narrowing down your field of colors, because there is so much color out there and so many options to choose from that even if you're going off of a reference photo, it makes it really difficult to decide what colors you're going to end up using. But with having the color cube, with having the swatches kind of laid out for you, and then with having a swatch sheet, which we did together on this channel, you can go through and figure out what paint colors you need to go with the color cube swatches that you picked out for your painting. It is tedious. It does take a lot more upfront time than my former process, which was just do the sketch and start painting. But I have found that with using the color cube and with picking out my paints beforehand, I am not ending up with sections of color that don't go as well as I wanted, or sections of color that I end up having to cover because I don't like the way that the values turned out next to each other. It has been really helpful and honestly quite a bit of a game changer. I I cannot recommend the color cubes enough. So having the swatch sheet that I did of all of my paint colors, honestly, that also helps a lot, because even if you don't have something like the color cubes, you can look through your swatches to pick out what exactly you want to use and kind of do it in your head a little bit with your reference photos and whatever that is, and you can put together something that goes with what exactly you're looking for. Essentially, I think that it is well worth taking the time beforehand to make things like swatch sheets and use things like the color cube to make your life easier when you're working on a painting, or realistically any art form. I feel like the color cubes and swatch sheets and just having all of your color options kind of laid out before you and then having an easy way to narrow it down just makes it a lot easier as an artist to be able to focus on the fun parts, which is actually doing the sketching, doing the underpainting, doing the overpainting, doing the details, the glazes, all of the fun stuff, doing the actual creative stuff. I think that this helps so much to just get some of the logistical kind of headache bits out of the way faster and easier without doing any damage to the creative process in the process. Now, I am a person who is both very creative and very what's a good way to put this? My day job is in logistics, so I'm very creative, but I'm also very business oriented. So it is fun for me and really helpful for me to get a lot of the logistical stuff figured out before I get into the fun stuff, which is why I make things like swatch sheets and I use things like the color cubes or the deck of worlds, which I didn't actually use for this painting. I have for most of the other ones this year previous to this, but this one was just, I want to do an underwater painting, and I haven't decided if I'm going to tell you everything about this painting, so we'll see how much is revealed. But I didn't use the deck of worlds for this one, but I did obviously use the color cubes, and then I've got all of my colors laid out here for you to see, and it just makes my life a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier for me to be creative when that logistical stuff is out of the way and kind of the technical bits are done. It's just easier on my little noggin, and if it's easier on yours, then that's what I recommend that you do. And if you're the kind of person who has no problem picking out your colors on the fly, then obviously don't do any of this. If you're the kind of person who paints a lot, I highly recommend compression gloves. And clearly, I forgot to wear mine at the beginning of starting this painting. So here I am starting on the undercoat. So this is just kind of a suggestion of what I'm expecting the colors to be in each of these areas. So I know this is going to be kind of a medium light greenish blue, so that's what I'm going to put here. and I am mixing a lot of water with this paint because I don't want this to be a thick layer of paint. I want this to be super thin, super light. In some places, I will see my sketch through this layer of paint, and that's exactly what I want. I want to be able to see what I'm doing, basically. And more than likely, these will not be the final colors at all. I will add more different tones and shades and hues and blend everything all in together, and it will look nothing like this undercoat. But having the undercoat, again, especially with doing a style of painting that I don't do very often, just makes it a lot easier for me to figure out what I'm doing and to keep track of what color I should be working on when. Especially with it being an underwater piece, it should have that kind of gradiated look, and it's not a color scheme that I'm accustomed to working with in this way. A lot of these colors are ones that I use all the time, but I don't use them like I will in this video. And that's going to make it a really fun project to work on, but that is a big reason of why I am doing an undercoat on this one. It also, if you are a person who is kind of light-handed when it comes to your paintings, then having this coat of paint down on the canvas when you get started helps so that when you are painting, it's not white that's under your paint. So the color that shows through is a color and not just white. I think I've talked about it in the past. I'm sure it's been a while at this point, but it can also just be a lot less daunting when you are painting if you have paint down on the canvas before you actually start on the painting. There is something kind of scary about looking at a blank canvas, looking at a field of white, and having to make a lot of big decisions at once and deciding what's going to go where and what everything is going to look like. And the nice thing with painting with acrylics, which is what I do, is that you can put down this undercoat and it'll be dry in 10-15 minutes, and then you can get started on the painting as a whole. And I think that just makes it's a little easier on your brain. It's a little easier on that, again, that kind of decision paralysis part of your brain where you kind of look at this whole blank canvas and go, well, what am I doing? It helps to just have color down on the canvas when you start the actual painting. And I almost never start the painting on the same day that I do the undercoat. I will do all of this prep that you're seeing in this video, all of this aside from picking out reference photos, will happen before of course it'll happen before I start the painting. That's not what I was trying to say. All of this will happen usually in an hour. I tried to set this video up so that you could see everything in real time. So none of this is sped up at all. This entire video is real time. This is exactly how long it took. The only stuff that I cut out were I got a phone call in the middle of, I believe it was choosing some of the cards in the color cubes, and I'm not going to make you watch this paint dry. I did sit and watch this paint dry for 20 minutes before I could finish this video, but I'm not going to make you do that. So any of the cuts are me just moving the camera, getting a phone call, changing the setup a little bit, changing the angle, changing the lighting, stuff like that. Otherwise, this is all real time. This is how long it takes me to do stuff like this. So it doesn't take all that much time. It's not a thing that is a waste of time, because again, I did all of this on a day when I didn't have a lot of time. I had about an hour of time to spare, and I knew that this was the next painting that I wanted to work on. And I knew that I wanted to show you guys how I start a painting like this, how I start a new painting, what all I go through to get that new painting started. And so I very deliberately took an hour of my evening that I wanted to do something creative, but I knew I didn't have time to actually get going on a painting. And I got started on a painting. So this is just all of the prep, all of the beforehand stuff that I would do when I don't have time to actually sit down and paint, but I do have a project in mind that I want to work on. And again, I am usually working on a couple of paintings at a time, so I'll have another one going at the same time that I'm working on this one, and almost certainly they're at 2 different stages. Right now they're not, they are both in this state, but usually I have one that is one that if I was going to sit down and paint, I would put that one up on my easel and I would spend an hour or 2 working on that painting. More than that, 2 to 3 hours working on a painting. I very rarely sit down to work on a painting when I have an hour or less. I tend to get very annoyed at myself if I have an hour or less in which to work on a painting, because I kind of just get into the zone and then I have to leave it, and I don't like doing that. So if I only have a very limited amount of time and I know that I have paintings that I could prep like this, I will take the time and prep a canvas like this instead of making myself frustrated by starting on a painting that I know I can't actually get to the fun part of in the amount of time that I have. I will prep a canvas. I will look for reference photos. I'll pick out colors. I'll go through the deck of worlds and come up with the next concept. And that to me is how you make sure that you keep your creative juices flowing, is to always be doing something with it, even if you don't have time to actually sit down and pull out the paints and get everything dirty and actually get into the nitty-gritty of painting. You can still do something. You can get the next one started. You can find reference photos. You can work on your swatch sheets. You can go through the color cubes and see if you get any inspiration for any new stuff that you could be working on. You can use the deck of worlds and come up with a concept or 2 new concepts or ideas that you think you could hone down into something really fun that you could paint at some point. I think that's an exercise that all artists should be doing, just to make sure that we are doing something creative and that we are keeping those creative juices flowing, even if it's not necessarily in the way that we had in mind from the start, because I know that we all think that we want to be painting all the time or creating all the time, but there's just not time for that, and there's not a way to really be doing that. So this way, you're always working on it, but you're not always working on it, if that makes sense. So here I'm taking a white graphite pencil and I am re-sketching some of my kind of guidelines for what I'm wanting on this canvas. And this is basically me redoing some of that initial sketch in the areas where I can't see it anymore. That top very light section that's obviously like closer to the sun, that section I can see my sketch through the paint, so I'm not going to redo that one. But this bottom area, the more I looked at it, the more I thought that I would like to have those guidelines back. So I'm not going for exactly what I had before. I'm just going for the general idea. So I'm just putting in a very simple sketch, a very simple outline, to remind me on another day when I come back and actually work on this canvas of what I had in mind and what I was going to do where. That's a thing that I think is really important to remember too, because it is really, really easy, especially when you're working on multiple canvases, to forget what you were doing and forget what you wanted to have where if you don't have a sketch on the canvas. So again, I will sit down and I will walk myself through what I'm doing. And here I'm going to walk you through what my plan is for this canvas. So these little corally guys, I want these to be in this section of the canvas. I want to have a jellyfish. I love painting jellyfish. So yeah, coral on the bottom, coral reef, that whole setup. Jellyfish. Where's my jellyfish? There he is. Okay. Jellyfish. I want one of those probably in this section of the canvas over here. And then the main bulk of the main focal point of the canvas is that I want to do some sort of a sea dragon in this section of the canvas here. So it'll be the main thing that you look at will be that sea dragon. And I haven't decided how I'm going to do it, but that's the gist.